Hi, we have arrived to John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." When we were talking about the blind man, and it was customary to think that when something bad happened to Jews, it was because they did something bad. And one can understand it, especially if one takes into consideration the Mosaic covenant, that there was this understanding that curse would befall on those who don't keep the requirements of the covenant. But Jesus said that no, some things do happen so that God may be glorified, and that's what Jesus says. This happened so that God could be glorified. And I don't know, it happened a few times in my life where I was in the situation that the only way through it was if God carries me through, and God did carry me through in certain situations. And I did see, especially looking back in hindsight, that yes, God was glorified in those situations, because I don't think that this outcome could have happened any other way. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. See, God doesn't he's not in a hurry to bring about the things he has in mind. I mean, just think about the Jews. They were in Egypt for 400 years, and the reason he did it was because the transgressions of the Canaanites, they didn't reach their height yet, and God was giving them 400 years and send them prophets just so they could turn to God. So the long suffering of God is great. The patience of God is very patient, and of course that in turn teaches us patience as well. But sometimes we just want things to happen instantly, especially nowadays. You know, when everything is one click away, you click on an Amazon order, it's here the next day. It's really hard to have that kind of reality where everything's available instantly: emails, messages, phone number, phone calls. At the same time, when you really want something, when you really need something from the Lord, he takes his time. Although it might happen instantly, but excuse me, it is my the way I see things, and it is in my experience, he does take his time. Or people say that he's always almost late. You always think when you need something from the Lord that he's late, it's not happening, and just when you almost lose all hope, God comes through. Verse 7. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of a daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." I think Jesus was referring to faith and was referring to walk with him, because he's the light of the world, and he's talking about the world's light. And those who are walking on the road that Jesus set in front of them, and they're walking with him, then they will not stumble. They will go on the road, and God will lead them. But if they walk on the road that God did not set in front of them, if they do things their own way, they avoid listening to God, that then they probably will stumble one way or another. Verse 11. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going to wake him up. See, fallen asleep again, not died, fallen asleep. And as I've already mentioned, when Jesus talks about the death of believers, he says that they fell asleep. He doesn't call them death. And verse 12 says, his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought that he meant natural sleep. And I heard this in a book, that in an audio book, that, and I know that I myself fell in the same trap. I made the same mistake of thinking that people in the New Testament were slow to comprehend things, had slow minds. They might not have been the brightest one. But then again, if you think about it, would you have reacted any differently? I think it's a lot easier to read theology books. It's easier to, study in school, and people are giving you the answer to a lot of things. But when you are there in that situation, and your brain it's just not there, you're tired, you're going through things, you might not have reacted in any different. I mean, if you think about it, Jesus chose those 12 for a reason, to walk with him. And although they were human, we are human as well. Just because we have different sins, we have different weaknesses, it doesn't mean we are stronger and smarter. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians that God chose the lowly, the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are. And he chose the foolish of this world, the weakness of this world, to glorify himself. So I don't think we would have been any different had we been in the same situation. And it reminded me when I sometimes, and if anybody, me definitely, I remember sitting in a couple of the theology classes, especially when I started, and those theology doctors started talking. I was sitting there like, what's going on here? And I can only imagine if you're walking with Christ. I don't think things would have been a lot easier. So we have to keep this in mind, that when we read stories of biblical characters, had we been in the same situation, we might not have reacted a lot better. Amen.